Respect is never won by demanding it. It is earned by what a person refuses to tolerate from others and from herself. There are 6 habits that, without anyone noticing, slowly erode a woman's confidence, her sense of worth, and the way the world perceives her. Let go of these 6 habits, and something remarkable happens. She stops chasing respect and simply starts commanding it. What follows is a deep look at each of these 6 patterns, where they come from, why they quietly drain a person's power, and what it looks like to release them one by one. By the end, the goal isn't just understanding, it's transformation. A shift in how you see yourself, and in turn, how the world responds to you. 1. Seeking approval instead of standing firm in your own worth. Many people spend years, sometimes entire lifetimes, searching outside themselves for something that was never meant to come from the outside. They search for acceptance, they search for praise, they search for someone, anyone, to confirm that they matter. And slowly, without ever realizing it, they forget the most important truth of all. Worth was never something another person's opinion could create. A person who doesn't know her own value will always look into the eyes of others, waiting for permission to feel confident. The logic quietly forms in the background of the mind. If they appreciate me, then I must be important. If they choose me, then I must be enough. If they admire me, then I must have value. But living this way builds a fundamental weakness into the foundation of the mind, because the moment your confidence depends on someone else's approval, you hand that person control over your inner peace. One day they praise you, and you feel powerful. The next day they ignore you, and suddenly you're questioning everything about yourself. That isn't freedom. That's being remote controlled by other people's moods. A woman with true inner strength sees this dynamic clearly and refuses to participate in it. She understands that appreciation is lovely, but it was never meant to be the foundation of her identity. She understands that love is meaningful, but it isn't the source of her existence. She understands that respect from others is valuable, but self-respect has to come first, every time, without exception. This shows up in something as small as the question she asks herself when she walks into a room. Instead of, "How can I make everyone like me?" she asks, "Am I being true to who I am?" That's a small shift on paper, but it changes the entire energy she carries. People can feel desperation for approval the moment it walks through the door. They can also feel the opposite. The quiet, settled comfort of someone who isn't performing for anyone. A woman who knows her worth doesn't need to constantly prove her intelligence. She doesn't compete for attention in every conversation. She doesn't rewrite her personality every time she steps into a new room. She understands that real peace comes from staying aligned with herself, not from being universally liked. Picture a tree standing in a strong wind. A weak tree fights every gust and eventually snaps, because it has nothing to anchor it. A strong tree has deep roots. The wind may shake its branches, but the roots never move. A woman with real self-worth is built the same way. People may criticize her, people may misread her, people may fail to notice her value right away. None of that touches her foundation, because her foundation was never built on their opinions in the first place. This isn't arrogance, and the distinction matters. Arrogance says, "I am above everyone." Confidence says, "I know who I am, and I don't need to prove it to anyone." One is loud and brittle. The other is quiet and solid. The tragedy of constant approval seeking is what it costs a person in the meantime. They say yes when they mean no. They stay silent when something genuinely hurts them. They shrink their own dreams because someone else doesn't understand them. They lower their standards out of fear of losing someone's attention. And every single time self is abandoned to keep someone else comfortable, a quiet message gets sent to the mind: "My needs don't matter." Repeat that message enough times, and eventually it becomes belief. That's why self-respect has to start with the small decisions. It starts with honoring your own feelings instead of talking yourself out of them. It starts with no longer begging for attention from people who only offer it when it benefits them. It starts with refusing to measure your beauty, intelligence, or value against someone else's yardstick. A person who is genuinely valuable never needs to announce it. A diamond doesn't need to convince anyone it's a diamond. Its nature speaks for itself. Inner confidence works the same way. It doesn't make noise. It creates presence. There's also a myth worth dismantling here. The belief that being valuable means being flawless. Many women grow up thinking they have to look perfect, speak perfectly, behave perfectly, in order to be worthy of respect. But real value was never about perfection. It's about awareness, knowing your strengths, accepting your weaknesses honestly, and continuing to grow without turning that growth into self-hatred. The strongest people aren't the ones who never struggle. They're the ones who stay connected to themselves while they're struggling. This kind of self-worth also reshapes relationships. A woman standing firmly in her value doesn't enter a relationship hoping, I hope this person chooses me. She enters thinking, I hope we choose each other. The difference between those two sentences is the difference between fear and strength. When you know your worth, you stop chasing people who make you question it. You stop trying to convince someone of your importance. You trust that the right people will recognize your energy without you having to beg for it. This is one of the deepest reasons people naturally respect those who respect themselves, because self-respect quietly draws a boundary around your entire life. It teaches others, without a single word, how you expect to be treated. The world tends to follow the standard you set for yourself. Accept being ignored, and people learn that ignoring you is acceptable. Accept careless treatment, and people learn carelessness is allowed. But value yourself, and your actions send an entirely different message. I am kind, but I am not available for disrespect. I can love deeply, but I will not lose myself. I can care for others, but I will not abandon my own dignity. That quiet strength changes everything. But even a woman who has mastered her own worth can lose her power if she keeps allowing others to cross her boundaries again and again. Which brings us to the next habit worth releasing. 2. Accepting disrespect just to keep the peace. Kindness is often misunderstood. Many people believe being kind means always forgiving, that being peaceful means never creating conflict, that being loving means tolerating everything thrown their way. But real wisdom sees this differently. Peace was never the absence of boundaries. Peace is created through healthy boundaries. Someone who accepts disrespect over and over isn't building peace. She's quietly building resentment and calling it patience. Many women are raised to be understanding, patient, the one who holds everyone else together. Those are beautiful qualities. But kindness without boundaries eventually becomes self-neglect. There's a real difference between compassion for someone else's struggles and allowing that struggle to repeatedly damage your peace. Think of holding a door open for someone, a small, generous act. But standing there indefinitely while everyone walks through and takes it for granted isn't kindness anymore. It's forgetting yourself. This shows up everywhere, in romantic relationships, in friendships, even inside families. And the lesson underneath it is simple but hard to live by. You can love someone and still refuse certain behaviors. You can understand someone's pain and still say no. You can forgive someone completely and still choose distance. None of that is cruelty. All of it is wisdom. A person who genuinely values you will never require you to destroy yourself as proof of your love. Respect is built through balance. Take away the balance, and one person keeps giving while the other keeps taking. One adjusts endlessly, while the other simply gets comfortable receiving. Over time, that imbalance turns into resentment. And resentment is almost always the result of a boundary that was never actually spoken out loud. Most people wait until they are completely worn down before they finally admit their pain. But there's a better way to live. Don't wait until your heart is heavy before you protect it. A small boundary set today can prevent a deep wound tomorrow. A strong woman doesn't need to raise her voice to be respected. She doesn't need anger to prove her strength. Often the most powerful response is calm and clear. I understand your opinion, but I will not accept being spoken to this way. I care about you, but this behavior isn't healthy for me. I respect you, and I also respect myself. Words like these carry weight precisely because they come from a peaceful, unshaken mind. A boundary is not a punishment aimed at another person. A boundary is a promise made to yourself, a quiet vow that says, I will protect my energy. I will protect my dignity. I will protect the person I am becoming. People often reveal who they really are the moment you set a boundary. Some will respect it immediately. Others will get angry. Either reaction gives you valuable information. Someone who has been benefiting from your lack of boundaries may resent the moment you finally create one, not because you became worse, but because you stopped allowing what was hurting you. That's why practicing self-respect can feel uncomfortable at first. When your behavior changes, the people around you need time to adjust. If they're used to your automatic yes, your first no will surprise them. If they're used to you accepting anything, your new standards will challenge them. Growth almost always creates friction before it creates freedom. No one can build a strong life while endlessly protecting everyone else's comfort and ignoring their own. You owe yourself responsibility too. Not a responsibility to become cold, not a responsibility to stop caring, but a responsibility to remember that your life matters exactly as much as everyone else's. The most respected women aren't the ones who forgive everything without discernment. They're the ones who understand what deserves forgiveness and what requires distance. They aren't ruled by anger, they're guided by wisdom. They don't spend their energy proving they deserve respect. They simply live in a way that quietly reflects it. And because they value themselves, they become far harder to manipulate. They stay calm under pressure. They become deliberate and selective with their energy. Their presence feels different and people notice. People learn how to treat you largely from how you treat yourself. The moment you stop accepting what damages your peace, you're effectively teaching the world how to meet you. But even after learning your worth and protecting your boundaries, there's another quiet habit that drains power in a different way. The habit of over-explaining yourself to people who have already decided not to understand. 3. Explaining yourself too much to people who don't value you. One of the clearest signs of inner strength is knowing exactly when your words are needed, and when silence carries more power. Many people believe that if they just explain themselves thoroughly enough, others will finally understand. If I explain my feelings more clearly, they'll see my heart. If I give more reasons, they'll understand my decision. If I prove myself enough, they'll finally respect me. But there's a hidden trap in that mindset. The more you explain yourself to someone who has already made up their mind not to understand you, the more of your own power you hand away. A wise person understands that not every misunderstanding needs a response. Not every opinion requires correction. Not every judgment deserves a defense. Your energy is precious, and where you choose to spend it shapes the quality of your entire life. So many people lose their peace because they spend their days trying to control exactly how others perceive them, fixing every wrong assumption, convincing every skeptic, making sure everyone fully understands every choice they've made. But the truth is simple. You cannot force someone to see what they aren't ready to see. Someone who genuinely respects you will listen. Someone who values you will make an effort to understand. Someone who truly cares about you won't demand endless explanations before offering you basic respect. But when a person has already built a fixed, unmovable image of you in their mind, your explanations become a place where your energy simply disappears, like standing in front of a closed door knocking again and again. At first you knock because you believe someone will eventually open it. Eventually, wisdom asks a better question. Why am I spending my strength trying to enter a place that was never going to receive me? None of this means communication should stop. Communication matters, honesty matters, expressing your thoughts with kindness matters. But there's a meaningful difference between healthy communication and desperate explanation. Healthy communication comes from confidence. It says, "This is who I am, and I want to share my perspective." Desperate explanation comes from fear. It says, "Please understand me, because without your understanding, I can't feel okay." A woman with real inner strength doesn't need everyone's approval of every decision she makes. She listens to advice. She learns from other people's perspectives. She reflects honestly on her own actions. But she never hands over control of her identity to outside opinion. Silence is often misunderstood too. Many people assume silence means weakness or that staying quiet means losing an argument. In reality, silence is sometimes the highest form of self-control. Anyone can react, anyone can defend themselves, anyone can speak straight from raw emotion. It takes real discipline to stay calm when your ego is desperate to prove a point. A person who has mastered herself doesn't fight every available battle. She recognizes that some conflicts are only distractions, that some conversations create nothing but more confusion, and that protecting her peace is worth more than winning every single argument. Think of a mountain. People can throw stones at it endlessly, but the mountain never moves. It doesn't shrink because someone threw a stone at it. It simply remains what it is. A grounded person operates the same way. Someone's criticism doesn't reduce her value. Someone's misunderstanding doesn't rewrite her truth. Someone's rejection doesn't erase her worth. This mindset is exactly what creates deep, lasting respect, because people instinctively respect someone who isn't easily shaken. Constant self-explanation quietly signals uncertainty. It says, "I need you to accept me before I can accept myself." A person comfortable in her own skin sends a completely different message. "I know who I am. I welcome your understanding, but I don't depend on it." That shift changes relationships at their core. When you stop over-explaining, you stop chasing validation. You stop trying to convince people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You become more peaceful, more focused, more genuinely present. And strangely, this often earns more respect than constant defending ever could, because people notice the moment someone stops begging to be heard. They notice when someone no longer fights to prove her own importance. They notice quiet confidence, and quiet confidence tends to speak louder than any explanation ever could. Character reveals itself through action, not through the volume of words used defending it. If you're truly kind, your actions will show it. If you're truly disciplined, your habits will show it. If you're truly confident, your presence alone will show it. A tree never explains that it provides shade. It simply stands there and does it. A person with real character lives the same way. There's a quieter gift hidden inside this lesson too. When you stop explaining yourself to everyone around you, you create space to finally listen to yourself. So many people spend all their energy trying to convince others that they completely forget to ask themselves the questions that actually matter. What do I actually want? What feels right for my own journey? Who am I becoming? Inner wisdom tends to grow exactly when the outside noise finally quiets down. But letting go of explanation and approval seeking is only part of protecting your energy. There's another invisible trap many people fall into: allowing their emotions to be controlled by the attention they do or don't receive from others. 4. Losing your inner peace by chasing attention and validation. Wanting to feel seen, appreciated, and important is completely human. That desire isn't a flaw. But the moment the need for attention grows stronger than your connection to yourself, it turns into a quiet, ongoing source of suffering. Many people give their happiness away without even realizing it's happening. They wake up and immediately check who has reached out. They measure their own importance by how many people notice them that day. They feel valuable the moment they receive attention, and feel invisible the moment they don't. But if your peace rises and falls entirely based on someone else's attention, you've handed that person control over your emotional state. That is one of the most quietly dangerous forms of weakness a person can carry. Someone dependent on constant validation is always waiting for a message, for approval, for recognition, for someone else to confirm that she matters. A person with real inner stability understands something entirely different. Attention is temporary, but self-worth is permanent. People change, opinions shift, circumstances come and go. But your relationship with yourself is something you carry with you everywhere, in every room, for the rest of your life. That's exactly why inner peace has to be built from within, not borrowed from outside. Picture someone holding a full cup of water. If they get bumped, water spills out, because that's simply what was already inside the cup. Life works the same way. Pressure reveals what has already been built inside you. Build insecurity, and pressure reveals insecurity. Build anger, and pressure reveals anger. Build peace, and pressure reveals peace. The goal was never to build a life where nobody ever disappoints you. That's impossible. The real goal is building a mind steady enough to stay balanced, even as life keeps changing around it. A woman chasing attention often loses track of her own power along the way. She might reshape herself to seem more desirable. She might hide her real thoughts to avoid rejection. She might accept far less than she deserves, purely out of fear of losing someone's interest. A woman with real inner peace understands something deeper. Genuine connection was never supposed to require abandoning yourself. The right people never need you to shrink so they can feel bigger. Real relationships are built on mutual respect, not on desperation. There's an important difference between wanting love and needing someone else to complete you. Wanting love is simply human. Needing someone else to feel whole creates ongoing suffering. A complete person doesn't walk into a relationship searching for someone to fix an inner emptiness. She walks in wanting to share a fullness that already exists inside her. That distinction changes everything downstream. Once you're complete within yourself, you stop tolerating things that disturb your peace. You stop chasing people who only offer attention when they need something from you. You stop confusing a temporary spark with a genuine connection. You stop believing your value is decided by whether or not someone else chooses you. A calm mind sees clearly. A desperate mind sees only what it's afraid of losing. This is why emotional discipline matters so much here. Before reacting, pause. Before chasing, reflect. Before seeking attention, ask honestly, am I doing this because it genuinely brings me joy or because I'm afraid of being forgotten? That single question can reveal an enormous amount. So many people aren't actually seeking connection at all. They're seeking reassurance that they still matter. But reassurance borrowed from other people is a little like drinking salt water when you're thirsty. It offers temporary relief, but it never touches the actual need underneath, which is self-acceptance. Accept yourself, and you stop begging others to prove your worth for you. Respect yourself, and you stop chasing situations that make you feel small. Trust yourself, and you stop fearing every moment of uncertainty. That's the quiet power of someone who has mastered her own inner world. She can love deeply without losing herself in the process. She can care for others without becoming dependent on them. She can give generously without emptying her own spirit in the process. A person like this becomes genuinely magnetic because her energy feels completely different. She isn't trying to extract anything from the people around her. She isn't demanding constant attention. She is simply calmly present, and presence is powerful. People are naturally drawn towards someone comfortable in her own skin, because inner peace radiates a kind of strength that's very hard to fake or copy. A peaceful person doesn't need to control every situation around her. She trusts herself enough to handle whatever comes. She understands that losing someone's attention was never the same thing as losing her value. She understands that being alone can be far better than being surrounded by people who quietly destroy her peace. This is one of the deepest transformations a person can go through, moving from needing to be chosen to simply knowing she's already worthy. But the journey doesn't end here. Even a woman who knows her value, protects her boundaries, and guards her peace can still lose power through one final habit: letting emotion drive her actions instead of letting wisdom guide them. 5. Reacting emotionally instead of responding with wisdom. One of the greatest battles anyone will ever face isn't with the outside world at all. It's internal. It lives in the small space between what happens to you and how you choose to respond. Many people believe power means controlling others, that strength means having the loudest voice, or the strongest reaction, or the ability to overpower anyone who challenges them. But real strength is far quieter than that. Real strength is the ability to stay centered even when life is actively trying to pull you away from yourself. Anyone can react. A reaction is automatic. Someone says something hurtful and anger rises. Someone ignores you and frustration appears instantly. Someone disappoints you and pain immediately takes the wheel. That's all deeply human. Emotions aren't the enemy here. They're messengers, quietly telling you something important is happening inside. The real mistake is letting every single emotion turn straight into action. Feel anger and speak words you'll regret later. Feel fear and make decisions out of insecurity. Feel rejected and chase after people who are actively walking away. Feel hurt and try to hurt someone else right back. Wisdom offers a very different approach. Feel everything, but don't let everything control you. Someone who has mastered herself doesn't destroy her own peace just because someone else disturbed it. She understands deeply that giving another person control over her emotions is really giving them control over her life. Imagine someone else holding a remote control to your mood. Every button press changes something. They criticize you and you become angry. They ignore you and you become anxious. They praise you and suddenly you feel worthy again. Most people, if asked directly, would never willingly hand someone that much power over their inner world. And yet many people live exactly this way without noticing. The path toward real wisdom begins the moment you take that power back for yourself. A calm response doesn't mean you have no feelings. It means your feelings no longer dictate your actions. There's a meaningful difference between being cold and being composed. A cold person simply doesn't care. A composed person cares deeply, but chooses her response wisely anyway. That's exactly why emotional discipline earns respect. People trust those who can stay balanced under pressure. They feel safe around people who don't explode every time a situation becomes uncomfortable. Someone ruled by her emotions creates uncertainty everywhere she goes. People start wondering, will this person suddenly get angry? Will they overreact? Will a small problem suddenly become a huge conflict? But someone with emotional discipline creates the opposite feeling, stability. She can walk through difficult conversations without losing her dignity. She can hear criticism without immediately becoming defensive. She can face disappointment without losing her sense of direction. None of that happens because she's weak. It happens because she's strong enough to pause. That pause is exactly where power lives. Between the moment something happens and the moment you respond, there's a small gap. Most people rush right past it and react instantly. Wise people train themselves to actually step into that gap and ask real questions. Is this response coming from wisdom or from an old wound? Will my words create peace or more suffering? Am I acting because it's genuinely right or because my ego wants to win? Questions like these create awareness, and awareness is what ultimately creates freedom. Someone who can't manage her reactions is like a boat with no captain. Every wave changes her direction. Every storm creates panic. Someone with real inner discipline is like a skilled captain instead. The waves can still get rough, the weather can still turn difficult, but she stays focused on where she's actually headed. Life will always bring situations designed to test you. Someone will misunderstand you. Someone will disappoint you. Someone will challenge your patience right to its edge. The real question was never, how do I prevent difficult moments from happening? It's who will I become when they inevitably arrive? Challenges don't create character. They reveal the character that's already been quietly built over time. Everyone looks peaceful when life is easy. It's only under real pressure that your true training shows itself. That's exactly why emotional mastery is never built during the easy stretches. It's built through consistent practice. Every time you choose patience over anger, you strengthen your mind a little more. Every time you choose silence over unnecessary conflict, you strengthen your discipline. Every time you choose understanding over revenge, you strengthen your spirit. Small choices, repeated consistently, quietly build a genuinely powerful person. Many people assume confidence comes from always being right. Real confidence actually comes from knowing you can handle being wrong. Many people assume strength means never feeling pain. Real strength comes from feeling that pain fully without letting it dismantle your character. A wise woman doesn't need to prove her power through argument after argument. She proves it through self-control. She doesn't need to win every disagreement. She understands that peace is often more valuable than victory. She doesn't feel obligated to respond to every provocation because she knows some people are simply fishing for a reaction. And a reaction is exactly what hands them influence over you. Stop reacting to everything and you become far harder to control. Your peace becomes yours again, fully, and people notice the shift. They start to sense this person is different. She doesn't break easily. She thinks before she speaks. She carries herself with genuine confidence. Respect very often comes from the things you simply refuse to let control you. But emotional discipline is still only part of the equation. Even someone who has learned to stay calm under pressure can lose herself in a completely different way, by quietly sacrificing her own standards just to stay accepted somewhere she doesn't actually belong. 6. Abandoning your own standards to be accepted by others. One of the deepest forms of self-betrayal is changing who you fundamentally are just to fit somewhere you were never meant to belong. So many people spend years trying to squeeze themselves into places that were never built for them. They quietly lower their standards. They override their own instincts. They silence opinions they actually believe. They accept treatment they know deep down isn't right, all out of a fear of losing someone. But real wisdom offers a difficult truth. The moment you abandon yourself to keep someone else close, you lose the very thing that made you valuable to begin with. Standards were never barriers meant to block out love. Standards are the foundation that protects an entire life. A person without standards accepts whatever comes her way. A person with wisdom chooses deliberately what deserves her energy. Think of a house. A strong house has walls and doors, not because it hates the outside world, but because it needs real protection. Personal standards work exactly like those walls around your inner world. They protect your peace. They protect your values. They protect the person you're actively becoming. Remove them and anyone at all can walk in and cause real damage. So many people confuse acceptance with genuine belonging. They believe if they change enough, people will finally love them. If they become easier to please, people will stay. If they tolerate more, people will finally appreciate them. But love that requires self-destruction was never real love to begin with. Connection that requires abandoning your own dignity was never a healthy connection in the first place. The right people were never going to need you to become less. They appreciate exactly the person you already are. A woman who genuinely respects herself understands that rejection is sometimes actually protection. Not every closed door represents a loss. Sometimes a closed door is simply life keeping you out of a place that would have slowly worn you down. This is genuinely hard to accept because human beings are wired to fear losing things. We fear losing relationships, losing approval, losing comfort. But sometimes the greatest thing a person can lose is herself. And when that happens, even what she eventually gains never quite feels complete. A woman who abandons her own standards might receive temporary attention. She might get temporary approval. She might avoid a little temporary conflict. But somewhere underneath all of it, she knows something essential is missing: her own respect for herself. And without that self-respect, no amount of outside respect will ever feel like enough. This is exactly why strong people tend to be selective. They don't say yes to every opportunity that comes along. They don't extend trust to every person who asks for it. They don't give everyone unlimited access to their energy, not because they think they're better than anyone else, but because they understand their energy is limited and therefore valuable. Everything you allow into your life quietly shapes who you become. The conversations you accept, the behaviors you tolerate, the environments you choose to stay in. That's exactly why your standards matter so much. They were never about controlling other people. They're about guiding yourself. A woman with real standards doesn't insist that everyone treat her perfectly. She simply says, I will choose the situations where respect already exists. That distinction matters enormously. You can't control every person you meet. You can't force anyone to behave the way you'd like them to. But you absolutely can control where you stay, what you accept, and what continues to receive your energy. That's exactly where true freedom begins. Once you stop depending on acceptance from absolutely everyone, you become free to actually live according to your own values. You stop chasing people who only appreciate the version of you that benefits them. You stop shrinking yourself just to make others more comfortable. You stop apologizing for having healthy boundaries in the first place. You begin walking through the world with quiet confidence. The world tends to respect people who respect their own principles, not because they demand it, but because their actions consistently reflect their own understanding of their worth. Strong standards create clarity, and clarity is powerful. People know exactly where they stand with you. They know what's acceptable and what isn't, and that clarity is itself a form of respect. The strongest people were never the ones who refused to ever compromise. Flexibility genuinely matters, and real wisdom understands that. But there's a meaningful difference between flexibility and losing yourself entirely. A tree bends in a strong wind, but it never rips out its own roots. Your values are those roots. Kindness can grow, understanding can grow, patience can grow. But your core principles need to stay strong, because those principles are what quietly shape the person you're becoming, one decision at a time, where real respect actually begins. At the deepest level, the respect you receive from the world always begins with the relationship you have with yourself. Value yourself, and you start choosing differently. Respect yourself, and you start moving differently. Trust yourself, and you stop endlessly searching for permission to exist exactly as you are. That's the real transformation. You stop asking, how can I make everyone accept me? And start asking instead, am I living in a way that lets me respect myself? Because the greatest respect you'll ever receive from the outside world always begins with the respect you first give to yourself. A person who protects her own peace, honors her standards, controls her reactions, and knows her worth carries an entirely different kind of energy through the world. She doesn't chase respect. Her presence simply creates it. Not because she demands attention, not because she's performing power for an audience, but because she has quietly built something inside herself that nothing external can easily shake. None of this is about becoming a person who needs no one. It was never about isolation or coldness. It's about becoming someone who doesn't lose herself in the process of loving others. A truly strong woman isn't defined by how many people approve of her. She's defined by how deeply she honors herself. Her value doesn't rise when someone praises her, and it doesn't fall when someone fails to notice it. She knows exactly who she is. She knows what she'll accept, and just as importantly, she knows what she will no longer allow. Because the strongest form of confidence was never about needing to prove yourself. It's the quiet peace of finally knowing you don't have to. When a woman stops seeking approval, she becomes free. When she stops accepting disrespect, she becomes powerful. When she stops over-explaining herself to people who refuse to understand, she protects her energy. When she stops chasing attention, she comes back home to herself. When she learns to control her reactions, she becomes emotionally unshakable. And when she refuses to abandon her own standards, she becomes someone who simply cannot be easily influenced or controlled by anyone else. Respect was never created by demanding that people see your worth. It's created the moment your actions show that you already know it. The world tends to follow whatever example you set for yourself. Treat yourself as someone valuable, and you teach others exactly how to approach you. Protect your peace, and others quietly learn that your peace actually matters. Honor your boundaries, and others learn that your boundaries are real and worth respecting. Being kind was never supposed to mean allowing yourself to be used. Being loving was never supposed to mean forgetting yourself in the process. Being patient was never supposed to mean accepting everything without limit. Wisdom is knowing exactly where the line sits between each of these things. A woman with true inner strength doesn't need to become cold to be respected, and she doesn't need to lose her softness to become powerful. She simply needs to become conscious of her choices, conscious of her energy, conscious of the person she is steadily becoming. Because the real transformation happens the moment you stop asking, how can I make others value me? And start asking instead, how can I live in a way that lets me value myself? Build that relationship with yourself, one honest choice at a time, and everything begins to shift. You become calmer, you become clearer, you become more selective about where your energy goes, you become more peaceful. And people around you begin to notice the difference, not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because you finally stopped abandoning yourself. The greatest respect you will ever receive begins with the respect you give yourself. Protect your peace, honor your journey, stand firmly in your worth, because a woman who is genuinely connected to her own value never has to chase respect again. Her presence simply creates it wherever she goes.